almost an automatic default setting of fear and anxiety when questioning any aspect of the system. And this has been done covertly, and according to my research, and I'm not the only one who's saying it, but there aren't that many of us who's saying it, this has all been done covertly by the House of Rothschild, who took control of world trade, and they already had a good hold on international finance, which they pretty much created, but they've controlled all trade since the Battle of Waterloo. Since Nathaniel Rothschild famously, he created a panic on the stock exchange by making everyone believe that he tipped his hat, and he sold everything he had to create the panic, and then he bought it back at a rock bottom price. And by doing so, he not only took control of the East India Company, he took control of the Crown. Because the Crown were, for all intents and purposes, the East India Company and the Virginia Company and the East Africa Company, etc., etc.
I think the Crown realised that when you come in with a crest and a literally, I'm a king, I'm a queen, I'm a crown, or whatever, people don't like that because they assume that you're dominating them, that you're some kind of hereditary dictator. You know, I wonder why people would think that. And so they figured out, you know what, actually, people like corporations because they think that there's nobody behind them. They think that it's just a normal, loving, caring entity that's just there to do business and what have you. And eventually it just kills and enslaves you because you don't realise that they're there to kill and enslave you.
Yes. Yes, very much. And at the same time, let's look at it this way. Since 1815, every single purported political revolution that's been written about in the history books, every single one of those revolutions was fomented by the money power of the Rothschilds and the agents of the Rothschilds. And this is provable that there's so much evidence out there, but I have documented an awful lot of it on my website, which is selfrealization.com, for all those who don't know. Now, sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, I watched a television show, I think it might have been mid last year, called The Aristocrats. Have you heard of this television show? I've heard of it. It goes into the personal lives of the wealthy, rich, and powerful, and what have you. And the only reason why I watched this television show this one time is because I was flipping through the channels, and they said, "And this week we're going to be looking at the Rothschilds." And I was like, "Whoa, I'm going to watch this." You know what they did? They said, "Oh, the poor Rothschilds. They're Jewish. They're outsiders. You know, really pity. We always are afraid of getting discriminated against by people." As he sets up this multi-million-dollar think tank facility and pays artists $1,000 per brush stroke in order to do giant murals across the freaking walls. It's like, did the Rothschilds pay these producers to make a puff piece so that people wouldn't see them for the tyrannical scum that they are? I don't give a frack that they're Jewish. I do care that they're scumbags.
Exactly. I mean, it's so easily demonstrated that they've controlled virtually all the mainstream media since the 80s, and they had most of it before that, but it was consolidated very much in the 80s. And then, if you look at every single genocidal plan that has been implemented over the past 150 years, you will, if you follow the money, if you look for who is financing it, you will see that at the end of the line is a Rothschild or a Rothschild agent.
And Rockefellers are Rothschild agents as well, aren't they?
Either Rothschild agents or illegitimate Rothschilds.
And also this brings us into, you mentioned the word illegitimate. I interviewed Alan Watt about the elite breeding programs, and it turns out that there's this really, really incestuous relationship among the elite of the world, in some cases quite literally.
That's right.
And I see a parallel here between the elite of the world's being related to the New Zealand justice system. I think we've got like 160, 180 High Court justices, give or take, and I think like about 120 of them are first cousins.
Right.
So whenever you want an investigation into a corrupt judgment, the likelihood is you're probably going to get their cousin doing it.
Exactly. Well, one of the other things that I've been heavily involved with for the past 4 or 5 years is the fight for justice over mortgages on these shores. And if you just consider that, by our reckoning, and there are a lot of people who have taken on the banksters on these shores now. When we first started, there were 2 or 3 of us who were going into the courts, including the High Court, and making the claims that could be easily proven, not just by using their statutes, citing numerous judicial authorities in support of the arguments that we were making. And we could only draw one conclusion at the end of it all, when judge after judge after judge after judge threw out what we were saying as totally without merit in English law. And bear in mind, Vinny, we are citing the English law. We are citing the judgments of English judges at them. They say, no, it doesn't count in this case. It may count in other cases, but you've completely misconstrued it. You know.
Really, I've misconstrued the law that's supposed to protect my rights, that's actually there to just make me believe that I've got them so that you can take them away without me knowing about it. Is that what your job is, Mr. Judge? Are you a Freemason by chance? Oh, of course you are.
and if he's not a Freemason, if he's not a member of another secret society or club, if they haven't got something on him that they can bend his arm with at any juncture over any decision that he has to make, then you can bet your ass that he will have worked in the legal professions and he will have been conveying illegal mortgages. And therefore, if a judge who was actually part of the conveyancing industry and took part in what we can demonstrate was knowing all-out fraud by the banks over mortgages, if such a judge would give a decision to a mortgagor who was claiming that fraud had taken place over this mortgage and that the lawyers were involved and they were the ones who advised the mortgagor to sign on the dotted line before they even owned the property that they wanted to acquire, before they had the money to acquire it, they were told by their legal representatives that they had to sign on the dotted line, that the mortgage was to remain undated. They never went over all of the terms and conditions. Therefore, if a former conveyancing solicitor is sitting and they're hearing these kind of arguments from someone like me, and there are many, many more besides, it's not just myself and a couple of other people who've taken this on. There are now hundreds, if not thousands of people flooding the courts with these issues, and every single judge, every single one of them has thrown the case out and dismissed it as totally without merit, because if they admitted that we were right, they would be implicating themselves in the crimes of the banks.
Okay. What's the definition of the word mortgage?
Well, it's...
From the French, original Latin, I think it was.
Or is it Latin, isn't it? Yes, the original... Is it death pledge?
It's death grip, I think.
Death grip.
Yeah, like you have depth gauges, and what they do is they grip and they measure the things. I think that's the origin of the word, and it seems actually quite apt, don't you think? You know, like a smartphone.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think I was interviewing Lindsay Williams this one time, and he talked about how the Fed was buying $40 billion per month of mortgage-backed securities, and I was like, I remember, what was it? Was it Jefferson that said those who give up their liberty for security receive and deserve neither, kind of thing?
Yes,
and so I defined a mortgage-backed security as a death grip backed by tyranny.
That's right.
You know, and that's basically what everything breaks down to. It's and they use this language deliberately, I believe.
They do. But if you imagine that the only recourse that the judges, and these are High Court judges and Court of Appeal judges that we're talking about here. It's not just County Court judges, it's them as well. But we're talking a lot of Queen's Counsel have taken part in this. They're all closing ranks. And the only way they can stop us making these arguments in the courts is by issuing what is known as civil restraint orders against us. And they've done this against every single one who has stood up against the banks in the courts. Every single one. But none of us are willing to shut up. Because the banks cannot prove that they lent any money, and they're kicking people, as I say, innocent, good, honest, decent people out of their homes every single day. And they did it to one of my very good friends and his mother this morning. And it was violent, it was tyrannous, and it was done almost on an industrial scale. They shut a street down with riot police at 5:30 in the morning in a quiet Midlands town on this island. They shut it down, and then they had all of the equipment necessary to cut through metal, to take off the bars and the protections that they put up to keep the bailiffs out. And then they violently tore my friend and his mother from their home, and thankfully they got it all on film. It was all captured on film. And they're going to go after the bastards who've done it, and they're not the only ones, Vinny. This is going on every single day here.
Oh, it's going on globally.
Yes, it's going on globally. I also have a friend who was evicted from a charitable housing project. She was evicted over an illegal tenancy agreement by a housing association. And she's a woman who was on her own in her early 60s. And she was evicted at gunpoint. Gunpoint. The police turned up in riot gear with guns. This has never happened on these shows before the last few years. It hasn't. It's been ratcheted up a lot over the past 6 months to a year.
Well, one would say, oh, that's a bit over the top. If you were a tyrannical scumbag, on the other hand, and you wanted to set an example to the other slaves of the plantation, it makes perfect sense.
Yes, exactly. And this is it. If it weren't for the cognitive dissonance of the masses, not wanting to believe that their government, such as it is, that every single one of those governments is a puppet government run by some agent of the House of Rothschild internationally, but nevertheless, if they would only not believe that their government would never set about putting into action a plan to wipe out the vast majority of the population on this planet, just the damage that Wi-Fi is doing, that enough on its own. That's enough to kill fertility.
Yep. And add on to that smart meters, smartphones, everything.
All of it.
And then add on to that the fluoride, and then add on to that the chemical weapons in the water supply, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Mate, it's like... I remember a video that I made when I was a lot younger. I said, we're living in a time now where we're living in a prison cell. And every single bar within that prison cell is a separate agenda designed to screw you over. So you're completely surrounded at all times with many, many, many different types of things that are just fracking up your life, everybody's life, and could quite conceivably destroy the human race in perpetuity. People don't see it, not because it's invisible, but because they can't see it, right? It's like, do you remember that old story about how Columbus was coming towards what's now the United States? He came across, I think it was some Caribbean tribes or what have you on his way there, and these tribes people couldn't see his ships. It was just not in their minds. They'd never heard or thought about such a vessel, and as a result, they physically couldn't even see them coming into shore. And indeed, it was Shaman who had to